Sorry, I had to slap my chest because I don't have a second hand yet.
That's okay, because I heard the slap. I heard of the slap.
Mm-hmm.
Folks, we're trying a new version of the adaptation of the recording rig. Both Josh and I have had a change of location. Mine was not all my choice, just because the place where we're living, they decided to literally sell the farm. Josh had no choice in the matter because Mother Nature said he had to go.
Yeah, I had to leave my house for a bit. So also some of our recording equipment is lost in transition. I'll get into more of that later, I think, but we'll talk about that later. Let's just call this like a return to form, kind of both of us together, live and having fun.
Put the theme song right about here.
Yep.
All right.
Oh, you want me to start it off?
Oh, I can start it. See, we got to get back to form.
I know.
Hey, everybody. This is Brian.
And this is Josh.
Welcome to the podcast for Curiosity Continuum.
Curiosity Continuum is an industry innovating, non-traditional company passionate about growing wisdom in the next generation.
We are the essential bridge between the analog and digital worlds by building collaborative communities that unleash the power of adaptive expertise and innovation needed to thrive in the 21st century.
We combine and mix essential elements needed to empower people to succeed in new ways, not possible outside of a creative, thoughtful, diverse community of fellow curious people.
Follow us on your favorite podcast app to receive notifications of new content. If you like what you hear and want to dive deeper, visit curiositycontinuum.com. Thanks for tuning in. Let's start the conversation.
I just realized that was opposite of how he normally did it.
Yes.
Back in the before times. But it
Back
just
in the
seemed
form-
like normal now because we're like, oh, well, let's change it up.
I was thinking about this recently because I'll actually be doing a gig at the time of this recording. It's about a month out, right?
Yeah.
And so if you've kind of seen the flow of my life recently, I don't gig as much as I used to.
Right.
Music is still a precious part of my life. It just hasn't been as present. But I go on a gig. So you kind of return to form. I'm practicing a little bit more than I used to,
right,
which is actually fun. And I have so many hours on the instrument. I may need to brush up some things, but I haven't lost all of my knowledge or facility just by letting it sit for a bit. What's interesting, though, is when you return to the form of what you're doing, you realize, oh, yeah, maybe you have to practice something a little bit where an edge fell off. It's oh,
right,
boy. But what's nice about it is that you sometimes get a different perspective when you return to the form. Story from the music side of life, Geddy Lee had an interview years ago with Rush, and he was saying that while they were still recording and Neil, the drummer, was still on the earth, he would take breaks from the instrument after a tour, and it would be months. And then he'd come back to it, and he would play, and he would refresh and play other things, and he needed that time away to kind of refresh before he returned to form. And everybody who knows the band Rush, whether you love them or hate them, they're not sloughs by any stretch of the imagination. Everybody would agree these are top tier musicians who can do unusually complicated things. And their return to form, even though they did something different every time, there were those breaks, and you kind of returned and you had a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for us especially, because Brian didn't allude to, we just said, Brian had a quote unquote not planned change of venue. I had an absolutely not planned change to venue. However, we still made the podcast work. And when we come back, it almost honestly feels like, to me anyway, it just feels like, oh, we're just doing the same thing we did. It's comforting. It's very comforting to actually see Brian on video, because I haven't actually seen him on video since before this whole thing happened. And
that's true, actually.
Yeah, so it's been a while. So it's it's kind of cool to oh yeah, Brian's alive and well, and I kind of see his new place that he's living. But he can see my new place too, because this is a whole new thing for me. And so it's kind of interesting. We're going through the same transition, but for different reasons.
Yes. Josh's room is a little bit less gamey right now, just because
Right. Right.
some of the stuff is safe away or trying to be safe away. Although he does have some game things in there. I just bought a Triforce from The Legend of Zelda hanging out in the corner.
Yeah, I bought that. I actually, so I have been, there was like 3 purchases, like $60 worth of stuff that I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to buy. And this Triforce lamp was one of them. It was like $20. And I'm like, I'm just going to buy it because it's cool. And we use it as a nightlight. So it works out pretty good. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff like like Brian knows that like gaming and stuff is part of me. And it's almost like if I didn't have anything gaming in here, there would be a problem.
Yeah. Oh, no, there's been a fundamental break in the psyche of Josh.
Right. And I'll be honest, like I haven't gamed since the hurricane. I haven't actually played a game. I've been just too busy. I told my wife, I said, my computer runs. I got that up and running. And we talked about it. We had a couple episodes where we just talked, and I had that one episode where, I was basically remote recording, and we were just getting back into the flow of stuff because literally these recording sessions I always love. They came up so fast, and weeks, like months, like I felt like a month was compressed into like a week's worth of time for me. Where like all of a sudden Brian's like, oh, well, it's Tuesday again. Are we going to record? And I'm like, well, no, not this time, And then it was like the next time, well, it's the next week. Are we recording, Josh? I'm like, no, not yet. And I felt bad for that. But I also knew that like Brian he cared, but he was like, oh yeah, he just knew we had to get back to the rhythm and roll, as I like to call it. And this is a good way to do that, even though it might not sound 100% the same once we get it all edited up, because I'm using different equipment than Brian, and hopefully I can find some of the equipment. I don't even know what happened to that board. Like, I literally took it out of that room, and I can't find it.
Calvin, if you're listening to this, who helped us get the board, like, we're going to call a homie.
We may need to buy another one for, like, I know it didn't... I might even edit this out, but like I honestly don't know what happened to it.
Is it possible somebody stole it from your house?
No, because nothing else is gone.
Okay.
They wouldn't have just taken that.
When they realize it's our podcast board, that's worth some money on the black market.
Maybe.
Yeah. It'll be worth more later, but right now.
I'm just thinking, Brian, I took it out of that room because there was water coming in. But where did I put it?
Right. I wish I could point it to you, but I can't. So.
No, I know. I'll figure it out. So I'll come back in here like, well, we might find it. We might not. And if we don't, I guess I'll be buying some new stuff. But if we do, this is just one of those. This is the weirdest thing about a traumatic event like this is I just want to put this out there. Like, there are huge swatches of time I don't remember.
Oh, yeah, that's fair.
Like, I just don't. I remember, like, being alive and, like, talking to my wife. But there was I think there was probably, like, 10 or 12 hours where we didn't even say a word. We were just, like, existing.
Yep.
And then after the storm, after the traumatic event, we were kind of, like, in this recovery mode. And everyone we talked to in our neighborhood, and we got out and talked to our neighbors for the first time, and some of them for the first time ever. Others, I've talked to them before, but it's been a couple of years. They were like the same way. They were just like, oh, well, this is totally weird. So that's that one thing I said about that in the Aftermath episode, where it's like we went from one day having everything to another day not having anything.
And that's jarring. I'm thinking about the title of this, Josh, where it says return to form.
Mm-hmm.
It assumes there is a form to return to. And so, like, there were constants that were in your life.
Right.
Friendship with you was a constant. Now, whether you could talk to me on a reliable basis, that was TBD.
Right.
Whether your house was going to be livable or not, that was TBD. Some of those things, the return to form, I think, is comforting because it's something that was familiar before the event.
Right.
And those things can either be good, bad, neutral, otherwise, but there is a comfort knowing that it's there. And I think like when we talk about the form that we've set up, like we have a pretty understood format now on the podcast, even though we've kind of flexed around it.
Right.
It's because people understand what we've established.
Right.
And we also knew we had a few guiding parameters, like it has to publish weekly, right? We need to have the content up and rolling, ready to go. And somehow, some way it's going to happen. And of course, Josh and I always want continuous improvement on stuff we do. And the fact that, it doesn't sound like 4K video, audio,
Right.
all the stuff right now. The point wasn't like the quality of the audio ever in the first place. The point was that these conversations would be captured and that we would have a flow together to talk about these things.
Right.
And I would encourage people in some of the application of this that if there's something that you return to, like a hobby or some other kind of thing, and it's something that you used to do that is familiar, please pick a healthy thing, by the way. Don't pick unhealthy behavior.
Right.
Like, if you used to be addicted to things, like don't go back to it. That's probably not a good idea.
Right.
But return to that. And there's almost like a refreshing of the soul that can happen, even if it's something where, like those days have passed. Or, like if you were an athlete once upon a time and go out and
but what I want to say is it's a return to form, but in your life now. So it is like we are back recording, yet the stuff that happened to us. And so it's changed the way the recording happens. It's changed the way we've done stuff. And that is valuable because people change. And like we've said before in the episode, nothing is permanent. Things change. And even someday, this podcast is not going to be around. I know it's going to be a tier for everyone around when the podcast is gone and they can't hear weekly Brian and Josh episodes. But that whole thing is like, now this has changed. And so think about that a little bit. Like everything changes. Whether we like it or not, it's going to change. It's finding your quote unquote the new normal, the kind of like the return to form is really you just getting back into something that's comfortable for you.
When I think about this topic and what Josh was saying, I'm reminded of a few different things that are coming together in my mind. First thing is the story of a river. Now, there's a river that used to run through my backyard. It was the Mississippi River.
Yep.
And Josh would come over to my house and we could like go walk down by the river if we so chose, right?
Yep.
That river, depending on the season, would change depth. It would change temperature, whatever it may be. But the river was always in the backyard. Now, our friend Olivia, who is friends of the podcast and in personal and professional circles, she does a lot of data work, like reporting work, and she is just world class at it. And as we're talking about some things that in the professional setting, she says, sometimes when you're trying to catch data, it's like taking a slice of a river. You take that slice and you'll have it, but it's not the same river when you go back to it again, right?
Right.
Very true. Different water, different things in it. Third thing I'm bringing into it is the story where my wife went through an orientation for some things that she's doing on the art side of life for her, which is really exciting, which would be another episode entirely. But they talked about having a river and its banks, and the banks of the river are the thing that made the river powerful because it focused it. The river is changing. The river is flowing. It's going to be different. All those things come together when Josh was saying, like, it's kind of return to form. It's a new normal. It's like a river and its banks.
Yeah.
The form is the banks, and the river is honestly sometimes you in motion.
Right.
Right. But you may return to that river to say, what has changed? What's the same? What's moved? And you can understand that because if you return to it, you can remember what it was before.
Right.
And I think it's a great story, an example of growth that you can look at, or maybe you shrank back. Hopefully you didn't shrink back. Unless it was from something bad, then please shrink back from that. But, anyway, I'll be quiet now. Usually this is when Josh weighs me down. So back like to form. I've overspoken, and Josh is going to reel me back right now.
No, but I think what all the stuff Brian said, all the stuff I said, I think is really kind of like you take it to heart. Like, so how do you, like look at yourself? How are you changing and growing? And then how are you pulling it back a little bit to like something familiar? So it's not so scary for you, because that's like what this is for us. Like, For us, this is recording in totally different places, totally different context, but we're recording again. And so for us, that's the fun part of it. That's we're getting together with our friends, and then we're recording content for you guys. So that's just really what I want to leave everyone with. I mean, there's really not much more to say, is there, Brian?
I'm not going to say anymore. Until next time, this is Brian.
And this is Josh.
For Curiosity Continuum. Back at it, baby.
Yeah. It was good. I'll leave that in just to leave it in. No, I'm not.
You know, leave it in. Don't leave it in. You make the decision. All right.